Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Future Media, How to Brand Like a Hip Hop Empire. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. Awesome. As you will see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those links and resources in the chat. Couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Firstly, let us know where you are dialing in from in the chat. Awesome. We got Iowa, North Carolina, Florida, San Francisco, Maryland. Awesome. People dialing in from all across the US and the world. Very exciting. London, Hawaii. Cool. Keep dialing in there. Secondly, we are going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please be sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the whole presentation, and we will try our best to get to them all. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. All right, now before we get started, I'm going to launch a quick poll to just step back, take a temperature gauge on how everyone's feeling today, and we use this information to guide the wellness programs that we provide for our global community of entrepreneurs. So let me launch this poll. It's going to be asking, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, and optimistic. I will give everyone an opportunity to answer that. Awesome. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share those results. All right. So optimism's definitely in the lead, but still got some feelings of survival and anxiety. So hopefully some of what we talk about today will address those feelings. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Perfect. And without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, deLisa Coleman. She is a multimedia futurist, author, speaker, and entrepreneur. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. Hey, everybody. So glad to be here. This is going to be an awful lot of fun. We're going to jump right in because I'm afraid, I love to talk, so I don't want to talk so long that we don't have time for questions. So let's just jump right into the presentation. Primarily, this is going to be basically images. There may be a few words on the screen here or there, but this might not look like your typical presentation because I've always been trained that we retain information more and are more engaged when you have fewer images on the screen and listening to a voice at the same time. Of course, if you want all that typical fabulousness, I'm happy to be able to follow up with a separate deck after the presentation. But this is what we're going to use live. So let's do it. This is how to brand like a hip hop empire. And let me just give you agenda kind of quickly, and then I will kind of proceed. So I will give you a little bit of info about my background so that you know how I've kind of come to these kind of perspectives. I'm going to tell you 3 components, as you see here, to building a strong brand strategy from a hip hop point of view, and then +2, and then a little bonus. I also have a slide all prepared if you want to contact me as well. And I guess I'll leave that up as we probably do live Q&A afterwards. Okay, so here we go. Um, so as was said, my name is deLisa Coleman. I have a long and crazy history in the music industry, mostly around hip hop music. I graduated from Columbia University here in New York City. I worked in production at MTV for a few years. My whole thing, ever since I was a child, was always about media, all forms of media. I used to create even my own newspapers with crayons on the floor, like anything. If it's communicating, it's all about me. I always wanted to work at MTV News, but it was just a very challenging, very political scenario there. So afterwards, I had an opportunity to work at what was at the time one of the hottest marketing companies in the hip hop industry. This is going back, of course, I'm still only 22, but this is going back during the time of what we call the golden era of hip hop. So this is like mid to late 90s, where this was really a time when, I mean, hip hop was starting to become commercial, and the majors just didn't know really what to do with this. So a lot of it was farmed out. So I had an opportunity to work at a company that was responsible for promoting everything from Dre's The Chronic to hip hop, Snoop's Doggy Style, Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders, Cypress Hill, Black Sunday. I mean, seminal like albums. But we didn't know it at the time. It was just like mad fun to promote all this. Anyway, I had just different ideas around this space. So I told the owner, why don't you hire me only half the time and pay me half? All he heard was pay me half, and was like, fine. The other half of the time, I started my own business out of my small studio apartment in Soho. One of my first clients was Virgin Records when they did a deal with Rap-A-Lot Records, which was known for the Ghetto Boys. And things just kind of took off from there. If it wasn't so cumbersome to like turn my computer around, I'd show you like the couple of platinum and gold plaques that I still have on my wall. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of those as they are in terms of like an OKR later on. But yeah, so things just took off from there. So much of my business then started coming from the West Coast. I ended up expanding it even into Paris. And so at a certain point, I was living between the two countries and then just there. One of my, I guess, most prominent projects that I got was when Jay-Z decided he wanted to take Rockaway internationally. My company was the lead one out of Paris to be able to help with that strategy, which enabled him to eventually sell the company to a company called Iconics Brand for about $160 million, which I believe to this day, don't quote me, but I think is still a streetwear record. And so it was just really just such a blessing to work on that project, because it was right after I set up my offices. I came back to LA, 9/11 happened. And so, you know, entertainment and music was not the first thing after a terrorist attack, right? So my business never really rebounded after that. You know, it's different when you're running a service business. You don't raise money like you would if it's a product, right? So I had a really great run on that for about 12 years. And then, like most things, it was great until it wasn't. Very tedious doing like digital branding, because I had become much more interested in all things emerging tech, had learned how to code just a little bit. Mobile marketing was a huge thing at the time, especially in Europe. You know, you'd come back here and say SMS technology, and people would be like, what are you talking about? It wasn't until like American Idol started, where you could vote, you know, and you'd be like, that's SMS. That's what the rest of the world is kind of doing, where things started to move ahead. Anyway, so at a certain point, I just decided, once my staff all found different positions from Punch Media Group, as you see here, I would start to do what I guess I had just kind of always innately been good at, which was looking at emerging tech trends and popular culture through hip hop lens, and being able to communicate and connect with people, whether it be brands or an idea or what have you. So things just started to move in a different way. I started to, oh, and by the way, my company was also one of the ones I was just looking at, Snoop here. When he did his first ever online concert, his former manager actually produced that, and he hired my company to co-produce. Nothing like it had ever been done before. We worked with Microsoft for this new technology, which had a million bugs. Sorry, Microsoft Silverlight, but he still pulled it off and was like mad fun. So all of these things are going on, and I just love the entire intersection of really future, as you see, technology through future media, multimedia, and pop culture. And for me, pop culture is hip hop culture, that lens. So I started to do more informal research, which turned into formal research, which turned into my first ebook, which when it was released, Amazon selected it as one of its best new media studies. But I always say it's kind of like, those documentaries that win Oscars and like nobody really knows them, but you have like prestige. It was kind of like that because I didn't have, the funds at the time to market it or so much more. But what it did do was launch me into so many other things. I was asked to sign a contract to be able to speak, be represented by this agency, Leading Authorities, which is really a key speakers bureau in the country. They represent like, massive names like Anderson Cooper, et cetera. I'm on my way, right? I was a contracted contributor in the innovation section at Forbes for many years. And I've been asked to speak about technology, social media, and popular culture on MSNBC because I have relationships with some of the producers there from other things. So they have brought me in and it's just been a really great ride. But I think I'm, just pretty unique at looking at this space, especially from a Gen Z kind of millennials point of view. I always say I was 18 to 24, 34 before I made it into that demographic block. And I know I'll be like the 95-year-old at a club talking about like, that's the hot track right there. It is just everything me. And I really do love those who are in that space. I feel that it just has the most energy. So this is what I bring to the world right now, really looking at this space, helping brands, politicos, and so much more be able to kind of tailor their message and narrative more toward this intersection, again, of popular culture, emerging technology. And so I do this through several different ways. That image, which you just saw, is kind of like our brand image for Link, spelled phonetically, agency that I run. Again, helping brands and companies be able to do what I've already said. I guess what I'm most proud of, though, right now is a social impact initiative I started during the pandemic called Game Change. And its intent is to be able to help women of color who are working toward leadership positions at, surprise, surprise, the intersection of emerging technology and mass media entertainment, what I call future media. We focus on pillars of AI, 5G, digital currency, blockchain, the Web3, and the metaverse, because it's just so important for everybody's voice to be heard. We're all so enriched by that. And I am intent on that as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, because everybody should have a seat at that table. And if we're able to help with that through Game Change, I'm so excited. And I'm working on my own AI-driven media company called Vapor, which is kind of in stealth mode right now. I have an alpha and working toward a beta, which will be released in 2023. So that is me. And so now you know why I'm going to tell you, because I've lived through all of this stuff. And I just want to kind of give you a quick, disclaimer. I think, hip hop has a lot of elements that are great. There are also ones that are a bit challenging. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination, suggesting that you go out and do certain things. Also, what I'm telling you today will probably fly in the face a bit of what is convention, what is told to you at, said incubator or accelerator or whatever. I'm not saying to, not go by that. I'm just giving you right now a little extra food for thought, right? Because these people have had massive success and global success. So there's not only one way to do something, not only one way to drive a brand or a startup. So here we go. The first of the three I'm going to give you is fire, right? The first thing I absolutely and completely believe is that you tell people what's hot, not the other way around. Now, again, this will fall under my disclaimer. Almost everybody else will tell you the first thing, right? Do you know your market research? Go and ask this, focus groups, whatever, gather all the information and get all that you can and change your thing all up, right? I always feel like this: the universe gave you the idea for whatever it is that you're doing, not everybody else that you're going to ask. So there's a very special way that you're probably supposed to bring that into manifestation. It's good to be able to hear some things, but I think there is the chance that one kind of recreates something in the image of those to whom they're speaking. And that's very dangerous. I think between that and pattern matching that VCs have, this is, in my opinion, why 80% of whatever's invested in, fails, right? Because it's just not brought through in its original form. You're trying to make it something that is hot. Hip hop does the inverse, and it's had to, because again, when you have something that is working from the outside in, you don't have the luxury of, doing all these other things. So you have to tell yourself again and again, this is hot. What I'm doing is hot. I am right, because everything else in the world is telling you that you aren't. So I think this is something that is a key takeaway for today. And as I speak about these, I'll give you like kind of mini case studies, right? So this mini case study for tell people what's hot and not the other way around, I'm going to use Diddy for this, because Diddy has always said this from the very beginning, back when he was before Puff Daddy, when he was just Puffy. This is going back. He has always said this, and it has not, kind of failed him. I think that, well, just kind of to give you a little bit of color on this for those who don't come from the music industry. Back in the day, we'd have these like massive like music conferences, and it would be like people with placards from different, record labels with information about, whoever it is they're promoting. Bad Boy would be out in full force telling you that all these things are hot. Craig Mack, Flavor in Your Ear, Biggie was coming, like so many different things. And it was just like kind of pummeling you that this was going to be hot. There was no like question about it. Even if maybe like it wasn't, it was going to be hot. Everything that he would pull and craft and put together and leverage, he would just keep telling you that. And I think that a lot of times what we say, it eventually becomes true. There was kind of the joke in the industry, and no disrespect to any Total fans if you're on the webinar, but there was the joke in the industry that he would just make this happen so much that there was this girl group called Total that was maybe not that strong in the vocals, that he made hot and made the industry want, just because of how it was crafted. And of course, he put them with, Biggie to be able to launch that. We'll talk about features later and how that can apply to business. But this is really, really a hip hop scenario. I think about it as well when Soulja Boy was ranting all over like Instagram, when Kanye said, or Ye, or whatever, if you don't even want to use his name now, whatever, hope I'm not offending anybody. But when Ye had said that he took his track off of Donda, everybody remember this craziness because it wasn't good. And Soulja Boy was like, everything out of my mouth is hot, right? This is a hip hop kind of just vibe, right? I think it's really exciting. And if you can carry it and not like have doubt around it, this can really, really create like major power. So let me show you how this works kind of in a world that you might be used to hearing about, right? Steve Jobs was one of the first to say, how would you know that you want an iPhone if it hasn't been created yet? I'm going to let you know what you need. It's kind of the same thing that hip hop had been saying, right? And we all know what the story is and the legacy is of Apple. This is also really used a lot in politics. It's called framing, right? Where we keep reinforcing something. Climate change, right? It comes back to that like same basic scenario where you're going to tell somebody that this is either hot or important or whatever, and you don't get off of that. But this is something which I really think drives this home. And I suggest everybody like look this up after because it's really helpful. I found it helpful. I found this through something called First Round Review. His name is Tyler O'Dean. He was an executive at Google, I believe, for a while. And I think he might be at Pinterest now. He's done massive research on persuasion, the art of persuasion. And this particular article, and I think it has the audio version as well, talks about several different things, but one in particular is just kind of putting it out there that this is hot or this is great, or telling somebody it's a great idea. It sets a tone in your mind. So like he says, when a host comes out, like let's say Jimmy Fallon, and he'll tell you who's going to be on tonight. We have a great show for you tonight, right? It might not be great, but it's already set up in your mind. Well, I guess it's going to be a great show. Tyler goes on to say, when you are pitching or writing or telling somebody about something, to be able to say, this is a great idea, it already just sets a particular tone. So if anything, be hip hop, be fabulous. This is about like fire, whatever it is that you're working on, even if you're not that sure of it, it's fire already before you even put it out. So that's one. The second thing is, second element, I should say, to branding like a hip hop empire is creating a legendary world. This one is like going to be a fun one to talk about. For this mini case study, we will look at the legendary, or maybe infamous or famous, depending on how you look at it, death row. There have been many like labels, in hip hop that have created empires like this. You could look at maybe Master P and No Limit, of course, Def Jam, of course, again, as I mentioned before, Bad Boy. But Death Row really took it to a whole nother level, both, in a good way and a bad way, I guess. They had this iconic CEO, Suge Knight. Again, for anybody who's either not a hip hop head or a hip hop head that's new, right? You want to maybe Google some of this. But Suge Knight became, very legendary for being both a very shrewd businessman, but also being very violent. Whether that was or not the case, I'm not, going to comment on that. But that set a particular tone for Death Row, and it never wavered. It just became bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like stories within stories. It wasn't hits. These were full-on personalities that like the world bought into, so you had everybody from Lady of Rage to Snoop to Dre. I mean, everything they put out was like hot, and it all worked together. We would call this in tech terms a suite of products, right? But this was just hip hop, right? You Dash, Corrupt, the Dog Pound, all of this. And it all worked well together because they were living, again, for better or worse, what they were actually putting out on wax, as we used to say, right? Or on vinyl. It was about gangster. It was about just legendary kind of mystique. And it was all very, very unique to them. It was a whole Lolo culture from the West Coast, and it really, really was hypnotic, right? At a certain point, they even had their own, I remember this, their own writer at Newsweek. This was before Murdoch bought Newsweek. This is when Newsweek was really, highbrow. They had their own writer that would cover like whatever it was they were doing. I mean, it was just like Dreamhampton, who actually went on to produce the R. Kelly docu on Lifetime, which won an Emmy and all that. Anyway, she knows about the music industry and from really the inside out. They created this whole world, and then, going off the radar and Suge, picking like Pac out of jail and being able to add to that product suite just really put everything over the top. How can you, kind of create a world, with what you're doing? It doesn't have to be right away, not today. Obviously, Death Row wasn't built in a day, neither was Rome, hence the photo of the Colosseum there. But just to kind of start to think that way. I was reading something last week or the week before at Harvard Business Review that was talking about how men tend to talk in larger terms, right? This is the future. This is where we're going in the future. And they kind of own and create this world. Whereas women, allegedly, tend to talk more in detail, right? So maybe this is how we're going to get there to that world. This is what we need to do. This is the strategy. This is the minutia of it. Obviously, you need both. But if you're selling and also creating something that's going to be inspirational to your team and to even yourself, think in like these worlds. I know at Harvard Business School, we were taught to think about flywheels, right? So you do one thing and it, kind of kickstarts that, and then this, and you repeat, right? And so when you have a flywheel, like at Amazon, it just keeps going around and around, and you make mad money. But what if you kind of turn that on the side and kept drilling downward like this? That to me is how hip hop tends to think, and it creates this kind of world where it becomes so firm that it like kind of locks out anything else, because you aren't even thinking about competition at that point because your game is so tight, right? It just has so many different elements. So I just think that this is really powerful, a powerful point to bring from hip hop into whatever it is that you're doing. Like, how much can you live it and create this world? I think about this sometimes too with like dating apps, and this dating app that's supposed to be hot right now, but the founder is like this woman who's like married. And so I'm wondering, like, when is the last time you used a dating app? Like, I want you to use it. I want your blog to talk to me about, these crazy dates. Create a whole line of lipstick around, dates that you do are going to go on, sell that stuff, like create a world, because we're in an era right now that's so uncertain that I don't think one thing or the other is going to hit it. You have to really define. And I think that is just really key. Guys, where are we? Are we on halfway yet? I hope not. I can't even tell, but anybody from Nasdaq?
About
Okay,
halfway.
we're gonna
Doing great.
Thanks. Okay. So we're just gonna keep on moving. Here's another thing, and I read this, I'm gonna say maybe a couple of years ago, and I do believe it's true as much as I love technology. it is important to be able to do something which is tangible, that you can actually, obviously the word tangible, touch, that points to something that is successful. These studies that I read talked about trying to knit or something like this, because everything we deal with, think about your day, how ephemeral it is. And in a way that's cool, but in a way it kind of isn't, because we as human beings, we need things that we can touch and see and hand down and so much more, right? I think there's nothing better that demonstrates this in the music industry, and hip hop loves this. All the music industry does, but especially hip hop. You need a tangible OKR. And typically that is, as you see pictured here, a platinum or gold record, for those who might not be aware. So gold is 500,000, platinum is 1 million. And then there's even diamond status, which I just read earlier today. Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas. Not only does she make, I think it's approximately $2.1 million a year from having written that and performing wherever she's performing it. But it's now diamond status, right? So 10 million sales. This is what you want. Are you kind of suggesting to your team and even to yourself, do you have something tangible? Because I know we have all these acronyms, OKR, KPI, whatever. How are you able to present that in something that is a real physical get, if you will, that you can hold and put up somewhere? I will never forget Chris Rock saying that, and he has a lot of different awards, and he has like, covers of him on magazines framed and all that. And they are all in his office, or at least used to be. And I know somebody said to him at one point, why do you have all that stuff like up there? Everybody knows you're Chris Rock. He's like, just in case somebody rolls up in here who doesn't know, everybody knows what time it is when they look around on these walls and see. We can start the conversation right from that. I think it's important. And Chris Rock may not be exactly hip hop. He comes obviously out of that culture. But the music industry, and particularly hip hop, I think having a tangible kind of goal, if you will, or a tangible get, like hunters have, it is incentive. So those are my like 3 main points for branding. Now let's talk about like kind of just 2 others, which I don't want to say are parenthetical because they are not less than, but let's just say some kind of additional pre-bonuses. And this, I think, is so important, especially for today, where we're all behind our screens. Me too. I didn't make myself go outside and take a walk today just for the sake of a walk. Like, I'm not going anywhere. This is important, what I'm about to tell you now, because it is going to help you with being able to understand the market more and being able to touch it for real. And it will help you to evolve with the market, right? Our mini case study for this is Russell Simmons, who you may or may not know started Def Jam, home of Beastie Boys, LL, Public Enemy, Foxy Brown, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So back in the day, Russell used to live in this, if you could see on this building, and sorry from Google Images, this is the best one I could get, this photo, this image. But if you kept going around the corner of Time Cafe, there was another building. And Russell at a certain point was living in and bought Cher's former penthouse. It was a 3-story penthouse, beautiful. He moved in, I kid you not, and lived in it just as Cher had it. And you might think like Cher's thing would be real glitzy or whatever. It's primarily all creams and whites and a little bit of beige. Moved in just as it was with the furniture. Anyway, and then around that corner was like what was legendary Tower Records. So this was like, Russell Central. He would, even though he didn't need to do this at this point, everybody's running everything from a Def Jam. I believe he had already done the deal with Sony Music, whatever. Russell would be out all the time. And he would be typically holding court inside a Time Cafe. You knew if you wanted to go in to talk to Russell, to pitch Russell, flirt with him, whatever, Russell would be there at his usual booth, holding court, talking with people, right? Talking, observing everything else. He was always out. He didn't need to be, as I said, but he wanted to make sure he knew for himself what was happening on the streets, what were people listening to, what were they wearing, whatever. I think in the era of so much technology and after the pandemic, there tends to be this kind of desire to, let's do everything like, digital. Let's just analyze what's happening on social. That's good. Don't get me wrong. But if you have a demographic, I don't know who you're going after, but I don't know if they're skateboarding. Are you out, or do you have your people out at, like, the skateboard hotspots, and they know you, you know them? Are you holding, dinners or salons or whatever, so that you own your space? And hip hop is very much like, all about that, right? Once that space is carved out, or as they're carving it out, this is very much about that, and continuing to interact with fans. I had a chance to watch actually the Cypress Hill documentary last week, or over the weekend. I caught the end of it. I think it was on like Showtime, BET Showtime, some collabo they have, I don't know. But they were talking about the time when they were on the road with Limp Bizkit, and it was all about just fan interaction. They wanted nothing to come between them and the fans. They even built, like, I don't know if I would like advocate this, but they built like a chain link fence in front of the stage to even get rid of security, because they just wanted the fan experience. And they would go out afterwards and shake hands and sign autographs and everything. It was really very much connecting. You can't tell me you don't know your market after that. I mean, it's just so powerful. And I think that there's a massive competitive advantage around that, because so many people aren't doing it. How can you do it, even if it's on a smaller level? If you can't do it today, how can you do it going forward, so that you can evolve with the market as it evolves? So you don't have to continuously pivot or try and figure out. You already know you have your full pulse, finger right on the pulse. And that is really what you want. That is hip hop. And that is key to creating and maintaining a brand. And then finally, of course, it's all about diversification, right? We see on the lower right here, I guess this would be the king of diversification. What is Roc Nation not into? Sports management, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody knows, right? NFL, et cetera. But I want to also talk about Megan for a minute, Megan Thee Stallion, because you can diversify as an individual. And so you don't have to necessarily wait until you are at the Roc Nation level to be able to think about diversification. Megan is doing it in her way, right? Sadly, we don't have a record label that I can even point to that a woman owns, who has driven it to, this kind of mass media behemoth. But I can, at least for individuals. And Megan is doing her thing, whether it's the Hottiverse, like VR concert. She has her deals with Coach and so many more. She bought a Popeyes, like Popeyes chicken and biscuits, like restaurant. Like, Megan is out here doing her thing. What's the common denominator of this? Once you do something really well, and again, this might fly in the face of what your incubators and all that say, but I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Once you do something really well, take it and run with it, and then take that understanding and that visibility and create the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing, because it's just like sucks in all the energy at that same moment, and it really creates power. Like, power begets power, right? So the more you're doing, the more you can be seen. You just have to do it like really well and make sure that you have a team around you. But I do fully believe that once you have something established, like, expand as much as you are able, capable of, with the team that you have, with the money. But I don't believe in just staying in the same place, because that just kind of, it creates death at the end. So diversification, very, very, very critical. And I think, just for another industry, an outside of the industry example, I mean, Apple. What more can you say? Serious mic drop on that. What else did I want to say? Let me look at my notes quickly. Yeah. And another kind of outside of the hip hop way of thinking, for kind of verifying this, I had a professor in business school who, when we were looking at a particular case, it was maybe some, train like company, right? Some freight company. And we went all through it, and he asked, what was the problem with why they didn't succeed? And people said a number of different things. And he said, the thing that everybody is missing is that you're not thinking big enough. Like this freight company, they should have seen themselves in the transportation industry. So therefore, they would be able to create various verticals and just be able to expand, because they just were thinking in their minds, or should have been, we own transportation. That's a very hip hop kind of way of thinking, right? We just own culture, right? So we're going to do clothes, we're going to do sneakers, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, right? And so I think that is just really key to be able to kind of just keep in mind as you move forward at whatever level you're on right now. My bonus for you is about communication, because everybody, I mean, you can't do anything inside of just, your own apartment, right? The idea is to be able to get this, whatever it is that you're working on, to get the message out there, but to do it in a way that is cost effective. And hip hop is really like at the pinnacle of that. I think we look typically at artists once they're very successful, where they're looking at a Nicki Minaj or whatever and seeing what's going on around that person. But make no mistake, because I know, because I've had to get them, to sign contracts to hire my business. There's like no money at the beginning for any artist, right? You have to work and show that this artist has met certain, as we would say in the other industries, KPIs, and then there's more budget. And then after you hit other things, then there's more budget, right? Same thing in the music industry, probably even less. So if you're able to do this in hip hop, I'm always convinced that you are able to do this in other industries. So back in the day, just kind of give a little context, and I wrote this out because I had to kind of think about what people used to do to promote, but it was all about street teams, right? Handing out those mixtapes or postcards or whatever. And there were wrapped vans. I kind of was able to find one that was a little bit in the spirit of this today on Google Images, but that was the whole thing, in this, hiring a street team just to ride around in the van to promote the name of your album, whatever it was that was coming out in key cities, right? New York, LA, Atlanta, Cleveland, all the key hip hop markets. And there was always the killer promo items that you would send out to press, radio, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So today, how can you maybe do this in that same kind of spirit, thinking about reaching people, but really, kind of price sensitive, right? I am a fan of podcast agencies to a certain extent. Not necessarily doing it yourself unless you really have to. It's very challenging to get those databases all together and kind of follow up, et cetera. But I have that caveat with the agencies, because I do believe they are overcharging right now. Sorry if anybody's from an agency listening right now, but this is what I believe. I think the prices will come down. I think it's very, very critical to be able to work with key podcast hosts, no matter what level they are, to be able to get your message out there. If you can afford an agency at the high prices right now, great. If you maybe can hire somebody else to create that for you, doing it yourself is going to be very tedious. But definitely the podcast scenario. I think that podcast appearance scenario. Podcast production can take a lot. So unless you have a team, or, you're really doing something which is maybe minimal right now, I would probably suggest something like a Twitter Spaces, although everybody knows the story right now with Twitter given new ownership, right? But whatever else is coming down the pike next, which will be audio, something that you can just tap into really easily, let people know that you're going live. I would look out for that. I don't know if Mastodon is going to really try and do that or not, but whomever, there'll be something coming up. I think whatever audio is a great way to be able to, use kind of the hip hop vibe in terms of, kind of driving your message and your brand. This is personally one of my favorites, which we would call the feature in music. So what do I mean by that? When I have an artist and there's going to be a feature right on there, that means that there's going to be another artist. It's a great way to be able to introduce an artist at a price that's kind of, somewhat inexpensive. So an example of this would be when the record label wanted to break Lil' Kim. And so then they're going to get a feature. She's going to be featured on Biggie's next track, right? It kind of gives one a sense of, well, I guess if Biggie is blessed her, then okay, I need to look out for this girl or something, right? Same thing with you might have a duet with Foxy Brown and Jay-Z back in the day on Def Jam, right? How can you kind of do this in your world? I'm terribly excited about features, if you will, in the tech space. There are so many cool things coming up right now. There's even this cool company that is about to launch this kind of 3D capability on your phone that you can look at certain images 3D wise. They're going to need something to show, right? Do you have the other side of that coin, and you guys can big up each other and kind of feature each other, right? I think that thinking in this way can really extend your budget, but also it just puts you in like front of different people who you might not typically be in front of. Who can you not necessarily partner with, because that's a little bit deeper, but it features like a quick like hit, right? Of somebody who's already kind of established or maybe more established, that you have something that they need, or vice versa, right? So a female artist on a male artist like track, it just had some sparkle, right? So just kind of thinking about that. And then finally, before I hit I think which will be my next slide, no self-respecting hip hop artist for the most part, unless it's like a Jay-Z, when you're at that level. But almost none of them will come out on stage without their hype man. Come on, you all know it. I'm even thinking about this, like looking at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Awards, which was just on, is still on, but it debuted or premiered on HBO a couple of weeks ago. And even when you see Eminem, hype man in the back, right? Energy. And there's the entourage, right? I'm hoping right now my new homegirl, Sydney, is on this call. Because for me, I'm going to be, anybody who asks me copywriting, Sydney is the dopest copywriter I know, right? That's just going to be what is said, right? I think that you can do this with each other, even if it's just your friend or one other person in the industry. How are you creating your entourage? You're big upping them, they're big upping you. No matter what, you're down, for each other. This is very hip hop. You guys know it is. And if you look at it, it really works, because you're supporting each other when you don't maybe have any other support. And it really just creates a kind of consensus after a while, and a hurricane. And I absolutely love that. So there you have it, your 3 main tips, 2 additional and 1 bonus about the communications. You are now ready really to be your own hip hop star. I think right now, people, it's all about like data. For me, it's too much data rich, culturally intelligent, poor. This, I'm hoping that I gave you, was more of a sense of cultural intelligence that I'm really hoping that you can leverage. And then my parting thought is going to be, because I asked this of other people, I'm scrutinizing while they're talking, and I do for myself as well. Lauren, if you know all this shit, then why aren't you phoning this in from like your yacht next to Jay-Z's? And I will say this, and I hope that you think about it like this too, is that no matter how much you know, it's really about the story that you're telling yourself over and over. And I think for too long, I think as a woman and a woman of color, you tell yourself that I need to do just a little bit more before I can get this or do that. I just need to do a little bit more. And you know what? I've just decided that I'm enough as I am right now. And I'm really excited about going into 2023 with that understanding. And I want you guys to know that too. So that's it. And 50th anniversary of hip hop. Well, I don't know who's counting, but I will say I had a meeting at the East Coast offices. Well, they handle East Coast and Western Europe. You don't need to care about that. But of NARAS, the National Association of Recording Arts and Sciences, which brings to you the Grammys, which will be happening in just a couple of weeks. Anyway, they have decided next year is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I'm going to be doing a lot of analysis around brands, how they're like working with hip hop, what's going on with emerging technology, and this and so much more. So if you want to stay up on that newsletter list and so much more, here's my info. You can follow me, whatever, on LinkedIn. That's my LinkedIn. There's my info for Twitter. Game Change Project, if you would like to sign up, because we're just kind of still getting going, even though it's been in existence for a little bit, but still kind of gathering up corporate kind of interest and really just their action behind their words. That's a whole nother story. But if you'd like to sign up for updates on that and when we're going to be doing our next events and things like that, because we just did a cool one with Samsung, please go to gamechangeproject.org. Email me for updates on, like I said, this a newsletter that I'm going to be doing about hip hop and future media and so much more. I can let you know about status on Vapor Media. And I think that's probably it. And if I haven't talked too much, there may be finally time for a few questions. If I can't answer this, in real time, I'm happy to do it, by email, but that's about it. And I hope this was enjoyable, fun, and helpful.
Thank you so, so much, Lauren. This was so,
My
so
pleasure.
insightful. Let's, excuse me, let's dive into some questions.
Okay.
All right. So let's see what we have. Okay. So one question here. What are some just like tips you could fire off on like diversifying your brand in general? Like what are some steps to get
Does the
started, thought processes to go through?
did this person say what his or her brand is?
They did
Because I
not
mean, it really
specify.
depends on what that is. So,
Yeah, they
all
didn't
right, well, let
specify.
me
So
just
if
like
there were any
pick,
just like general tips
well,
or
let me just like pick something. I mean, I don't know unless you wanted me to like I said, further expand on that. Like, you know, dating app. Like I would want somebody, if that were my product, I would be creating a full-on world with that. Like I said, I don't know if it needs to be, a makeup line or whatever. I mean, a lot of people maybe are not fans of Gwyneth Paltrow, but you cannot front on her brand diversification game. She is selling non-toxic cookware and this and that, anything that falls into this I don't know, I don't want to call it a healthy lifestyle, but it is a non-toxic lifestyle. I don't know what that would
Sure,
be
yeah.
called, a wellness lifestyle, right? That
Mhm.
is somebody who is, all about diversification. She's got the candle game going. She's got this, I mean, that is, and it all started from just her interest, which was at first a newsletter, and now has kind of turned into this media empire, which then now also has products which it sells, right? So that is diversification. A quick example, how do you think of that? I think a lot of it hopefully be organic. You really like this, you really want to share whatever it is that you're doing with other people, and you
Mhm.
couldn't hold it back if you wanted to. So it should be something where it just, flows from you. If you're going to have to think about, well, this is how I should diversify, it's either not time to do it, or it's really not going to be able to be sustained because you aren't doing it from like the heart. Like, you know what I mean? It needs to be
Yeah, I love that.
really what you love. Hip hop artists, they love sneakers, right? They love clothes. They love, liquor. Look at 50 Cent, right? I love gangsters. So I'm going to just basically take over stars with all of this series. And I love alcohol. So I'm going to launch this, brand, and it's going to make me mad money, right? And so it's just really like that. It is an extension of your lifestyle or your brand's lifestyle. I think of your brand, I guess, almost as like a person. And what does that person like to do? What would he or she do if he or she were, alive? That's the way I would say approach it without knowing exactly what it is.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. And then if you want to stop sharing your screen, we could just go into like a you and I on the screen. Perfect.
Okay. Woo.
Awesome. And so let's move on to another question. Can you kind of talk about, you know, the new media that exists now and like moving away from traditional media and like, you know, can branding be used to make traditional media still attractive to audiences, or is it just really time to start moving to these new forms of media?
I think like anything, I mean, everybody knows the saying that came from hip hop culture, keep it real, keep it 100, 100. It has to be something that is organic and authentic to whatever it is that you're doing, or it eventually crumbles. I love the Wall Street Journal. Like, who doesn't? But yesterday I saw that they're going to, now be on TikTok to make sure that they can hit a younger audience, and they're going to interact with the comments. I think they're going to be in for a pretty big surprise when they start interacting with those comments, because young people are going to be like, we don't believe that, or that's like fake or whatever. So they think it's going to be one thing, but it's going to be another one. Two, it's not just about taking your thing and slapping it on something where I want to just do this. And so now I'm, cool. And I'm, reaching people because I'm in this space. does it make sense to be, in that space? Is there a reason to be in the metaverse where it would not make sense, anywhere else? Or is that what's the logical extension of whatever it is that you're doing physically, into the metaverse? I think that, those are about questions that only you can answer, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't be everywhere doing everything. Like, I think, to quote that philosopher, too short from the bay, get in where you fit in. Like, don't just be all over the place. I think, what are you truly excited about, and what is it that makes sense for your brand, and then to pair it, with that. Is it Web3? And how are we even defining Web3 just yet? You know what I mean? So I think that, pick something and then, do it well. And then, like I said, build. But I would definitely be reading about all of these things all day, every day. And then at a certain point, it'll like click and be like, that's what I need to do, but in my
Yeah.
way. So that's what I would probably suggest, dear questioner. I hope that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was super helpful. And you mentioned authenticity, so I wanted to just ask how how can you maintain authenticity when you're kind of selling yourself and selling your business, and how do you drive that purpose to the forefront?
I don't think that that's a quick journey, because it is about, like, and sometimes admitting to yourself, like, who you are or what you like, or being able to say that even if the rest doesn't like this, like I do. And so I think it's a continual kind of conversation, with yourself, and having maybe friends as well who are honest with you, but having very strong conviction, and not always being, like I said, running around asking, like, this is my like concept for my startup. What do you think about it? What do you think? But that's going to like
Yeah,
really dilute it. So I think when one does that, it's harder to maintain, kind of your own center, and to be true to it. Going
absolutely.
back to the Hall of Fame awards, it reminds me of when Lionel Richie, got on stage to receive his award, given by the fabulous Lenny Kravitz, looking fabulous. Okay, that's a whole nother story. But he said that every time he would take a different like turn in a genre, his like people around him, the label, whatever, be like, oh, that's going to be the end of your career. When he wrote like Jesus is Love, when he did calypso music all night long, that was always going to be the end. And he said that, he really had to fight in his mind to maintain being, he is a creative, what did he say? Well, you guys need to watch it, but like something like, I'm a creative artist. When you are truly creative, it can go like anywhere. So you have to really just maintain that conviction, and just know that it's right, because the universe is speaking like to you, coming through you and out, and to go for it.
I love it. That's awesome. Super great advice. So looking here, how is branding connected to fundraising, specifically when it comes to like a wellness space for a solopreneur, Black woman-owned business? How would you kind of address that?
Oh, I think it's everything. One of the reasons why I was so enamored at working at MTV, and again, this is going back to where like the channel, actually showed videos, and it was as part of the youth culture, was as much a part of that brand as, vice versa. And I learned about branding there. And even though I have not worked in a corporation in many years, nor would I'm very, very grateful, as hard as it was, for that experience, because it really taught me about branding. They were fierce about it, fierce about protecting it, fierce about always talking about it in a meeting, what it stood for, why the colors were like this, why and how it should move, where it should be present, where it shouldn't be present. And I was like, who cares? But that's, I mean, it's whatever. But that's why it was so established. And that's why it still has, I think, a certain mystique, even, to this day. People were living and dying, to work at MTV. Brand is everything. We tend to sometimes almost worship it in Western civilization, which I would like to see us get away from a little bit. But at the same time, it is very important to create something that stands for something, and it kind of doesn't move. Like in business school, we would call this like your North Star, right? So you have your brand
Right.
facing your North Star, and you can always come back to that. You can say all that stuff all day and all night, but it doesn't matter unless it actually like hits you in the heart. So brand is, everything, whether, you was gangster rap back in the day, they didn't think about that brand. That was gangster rap, living and dying, the clothes,
Right.
the lingo, the dance, crip walk, everything that stood for that. And when you saw it, you immediately recognized it, right? We might call that in traditional marketing, like a tribal, like kind of marking where you can recognize
Sure.
another by whatever. Yes, it's incredibly, incredibly important. And I would think deep and hard about what it stands for and why, and then like you go for that. That's what it is. You can always tweak, but it's kind of hard, once you start to get it out there. But what does it stand for? I think those mission statements are critical to like the development of the brand, and then being able to I think expand it. The CMO of P&G, who's like legendary, Mark Pritchard, I had the opportunity to interview him on stage at
Yeah.
a conference in Paris, and he's of course very big on this because he's the CMO of
Yeah.
P&G and responsible for multi-millions. But he also talks about this concept of brand citizenship, and so you see this recognized in P&G, like with the different types of ads that they support, or like you'll see that oil of Olay. Black woman with braids float in the Thanksgiving Day parade, right? How is this brand? What is its position in society? And I think that whether you're talking about this as social impact or whatever, this notion of brand is important not only for you and the product that you're working on, but how it is going to interact even more within society as we have more and more challenges as a whole, as a collective to overcome. So that's my long answer on why is brand
Awesome.
important, or if it's important. It's everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. I think we got time for one more question. So, what do you think is the impact of influencers today, and how effective are they in contributing to your brand strategy? And this is coming from an entrepreneur who designs jewelry.
I think, well, if it's the right influencer, it all depends on what it is that you're trying to say. So,
Really?
I think that influencers are obviously helpful, but it depends on, I guess, the frequency that maybe you're going to use them, and how. Like, I don't want to just see, this reminds me of a line that actually designs these two pieces that I have on now. And I was like, I don't know, should I buy this, should I not? And I take a long time to decide, do I want to actually
Yeah.
buy something? Because I'm a Pisces and I have to think about it like 5 different ways. So one of the things though that made me say, oh, maybe it is legit, is that she showed, like, I think like Megan Thee Stallion on the red carpet with one of the things, and maybe Hailey Bieber on another thing with whatever. These people are not necessarily my icons, but it just gave, like, it lended a little bit of credibility to it. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm in my Megan mood this moment. Let me just say, hit like buy.
Totally.
I think if you can do that in an authentic way, it's even better. Like, can you get that person on audio, or maybe they're going to speak somehow, in social media, like with their voice about this, and show commitment or something, I think is important. But yeah, I mean, we live in an era of celebrity. Let's just, be very real about it. So yes, I think it's helpful. I would not overdo it, and I would be very, very just careful about who I'm working with and how. I think hip hop is also, for better or worse, a good example of that too. Sometimes you may align yourself with somebody, and then they just, show out, and then you're like, I can't. There goes all that money,
Yeah.
after I aligned with that person. So it is kind of something to think about, but nobody's going to turn away the right person saying the right thing about, like, the right product. This is what everybody wants. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
even for yourself though, huh? I think not
Mhm.
just about brands, but if you can get it for yourself, somebody like saying something about, like, I'm working on something right now for Game Change, about different artists who will be talking about women in a certain way, which has never been done before. That's priceless. You know what I mean? So yes.
Absolutely. Love it. And if you just had one key takeaway that you want the audience to leave with, most important thing that you want them to leave with, what would that be?
Mindset is everything. You can read all this stuff, you can look at data, whatever, but until it's really in, not well, we say mindset, and it is how you're thinking, talking to yourself. But what are you feeling about the situation and yourself? Do you feel really good about like the whole thing when you're talking to somebody or sending that email? I really believe that um, the emotion that you're putting behind something, it creates momentum. We are, giving off what electrical, like whatever things when we're thinking and all that. And I think really as somebody who has been very reliant upon uh, data, past success, Ivy League background, et cetera, you have to really, at a certain point, just be like, again, like I said, I'm amazing and I'm going for it.
Yeah,
Like nobody who else going to tell you that, right? I'm
totally.
not a fan of Oprah at all. Sorry for any fans, people who are. But I remember her saying something about like, you have to put the crown on yourself, right? The crown is laying there. You should put it on yourself. Nobody's going to be like, let me crown you today. Why?
Mhm.
No, I think that self-belief and really moving from that idea of things are really good. And I'm so glad to see that you guys are primarily, optimistic. That positive feeling, all that stuff, it really does make a difference. And I can say that I'm living proof of it because I've already lived like the other way and
Yeah,
and things like just crash in. So yes, it is a much better space to be in if you can,
awesome.
and
Love
to
it.
be gentle with yourself because it's not going to work like that every day. Some days going to be like,
Totally. So
yeah,
important. Thank you
yeah.
so much. This has
My
been so
pleasure. Thanks
great.
for listening.
I'm just gonna launch.
Send me your email things and stuff because I have something coming up that I think you guys will find potentially beneficial. So email me and I wish you luck in everything you're doing and a great holiday season. And thank you to the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center for reaching out. I appreciate it so much. I'm honored.
It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. We are just going to launch one more quick poll. What is keeping you up at night? So if you could just answer quickly so we can kind of get a
Oh
gauge of some of the
no.
things
You
people
shouldn't
are
be up at night. You
struggling
should be meditating and going to sleep then.
with. Awesome. I'm going to end that poll and quickly share the results. Looks like finance is in the leads. Sales and marketing are also up there, but we have a good smattering all around. So we will continue to develop programming that addresses those needs. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Lauren. It has been such a pleasure.
My pleasure.
And thank you all in the audience for taking the time to join us. We'd love for you to join us for upcoming webinars so you can view those in the links using the chat. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.